Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to do something a little bit different. We are going to read an article from, yes, CNN. The title of this article Is Helicopter Tourism Safe? Questions swirl over the popular thrill rides after a recent tragedy. So this was written obviously after the fatal New York City Bell 206 accident that happened a couple weeks ago. I posted a video about that. That was a real very sad accident. But I just wanted to read this article from a pilot's perspective and just give my thoughts on this. I have done helicopter tours in New York City. I am intimately familiar with this operation. I'm going to call the balls and strikes. There are some aspects about it that are quite dangerous. There are some that the media gets wrong. So in this video, we're going to read through it and I will give my thoughts as we go through it just as a helicopter pilot. Let's get into it. So I actually had to pay $3.99 for CNN to actually read this article, which is like kind of messed up, but I paid it, so let's read this. Is helicopter tourism safe? Questions swirl over the popular thrill rides after a recent tragedy. This is by Holly Yan. No shade at Holly, but we'll see what she has to say. First off, the title, Popular Thrill Rides. I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it is kind of for the thrill of it, but it's mostly like sightseeing because you want to see stuff. You're not doing it like for a roller coaster thrill. That's not what a helicopter ride should be. It should be pretty smooth. Besides, I mean, a little bit of bumps. The most breathtaking way to capture New York City's iconic skyline from above is now mired in scrutiny after a tourism helicopter crash, killing everyone on board. I will just say that this does happen. This one is like unfortunate, absolutely super sad, but this does happen. There are upwards of 30 to 50,000 of these types of tourist flights each year in New York alone, said Peter Goels, former managing director of the National Transportation Safety Board. It's a big business in New York. True, very big deal. Beyond the Big Apple, sightseeing flights are also popular in Hawaii, Alaska, and Arizona, where tourists can soar above the Grand Canyon. Also absolutely true. But helicopters don't have all the strict requirements that passenger jets must have, such as so-called black boxes on board. That doesn't impact safety at all. It's just like if a fatality or an incident happens, we can learn from it, but that doesn't make things safer. And unlike pilots steering commercial jets, tourism helicopter pilots often double as sightseeing guides, pointing out photo ops and answering tourist questions while flying an aircraft solo. Okay, interesting point. Let's dig into this. Unlike pilots steering commercial jets, tourism helicopter pilots often double as sightseeing guides. In some places, this is absolutely true. In some places, you are giving the guide and pointing things out. In New York City at the company I worked at, I will not name names, but we did not do this. We had an iPod that played a soundtrack. You flew a set airspeed, 100 knots around your flight path, and the iPod was tracked to the certain amount of points, and it was like actually pretty close. So you would just fly 100 knots ground speed, and then from the time you take off, you press it, you go, and as you're flying along, it would just call out different sites. It had sound effects. It was really nice. So my job is just to fly the helicopter, to talk to air traffic control, make sure I'm aviating safely. In certain places, yes, pilots do the sightseeing part of it and talk to passengers, which could add definitely some amount of workload and could make it more dangerous. But really, pilots are talking all day long to air traffic control, to crew members. It's not that much. I wouldn't really consider that a big safety factor. Industry experts say safety is paramount, and tens of thousands of helicopter tourism flights land safely every year. If I didn't think it was safe, I would not put my family on it, says Jeff Smith, chairman of the Eastern Region Helicopter Council, a nonprofit trade group that represents helicopter operators. Just to put it in perspective, I have 3 little kids. They're 13, 11, and 10, and I put them and my friends and family on commercial air tours all the time. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's totally safe. I would put my family on it. But Goals won't let his children board a helicopter tour. I've got 2 daughters who go away on trips all the time, he said. I tell them they cannot go on these things. I don't think the safety oversight of these kinds of flights is robust enough. Definitely an opinion. I don't know. What do I think? Would I put my family on a helicopter tour? Yeah, I think it's safe enough. It's really expensive. I wouldn't afford it. Yeah, I think it's safe enough. Definitely. And there are reputable companies and there are less reputable companies. I would definitely go for the more expensive, more research, more reputable companies. Black boxes weren't on doomed helicopter flight as they're not required. Yeah, they don't need to be required. I mean, it's cool, but and it does aid in accident investigation, but it doesn't make it safer. More than a dozen people have died in U.S. helicopter tour accidents in 2018. Actually, maybe a controversial take. More than a dozen people have died in U.S. helicopter tour accidents in 2018. I don't know what the number is, but if it's a dozen, if it's 2 dozen, every life counts. And of course, it's a different story when you're talking about your family. So I'm granting all that. But just looking at this analytically and calling balls and strikes, that's not that many. I feel terrible saying that, but it's true. Like, what is the number? 15, 20? If you're talking like 50 or 100, that's a lot. But like, of the amount of flight hours that happen, like it's not that bad, right? I mean, terrible point, but it's true. But flight recorders that may have helped with the investigations weren't aboard. I get it, but like, and also, not speculating, but certain types of malfunctions and accidents would not be helped by. You can't. A black box or a flight recorder is not going to determine the cause. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but I don't know. In 2018, 5 passengers on a doors-off helicopter tour drowned after the aircraft plunged into the water, and the tourists couldn't free themselves from their safety harnesses. That was a bad one. All accidents are bad, but that's really bad. Can you imagine? Like, I'm pretty sure that was like a successful auto rotation, but then the helicopter flipped. I think that's what happened. Actually, let's check real quick because I don't want to. Yeah, so I think they did a successful auto rotation. Do you see that video there? So I mean, that's really unfortunate. Sorry, I'll come back here. But yeah, not being able to free yourself, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So let's read real quick here. In 2018, 5 passengers on a doors-off helicopter tour drowned after the aircraft plunged into water and the tourists couldn't free themselves. Oh, from their safety harnesses. That's terrible. The tragedy prompted the FAA to issue tighter regulations on such flights until safer harnesses were added. Great. The latest tragedy happened last week when an aerial tour helicopter broke apart midair and plummeted into the Hudson River, killing a family of 5 in their pilot. Terrible, terrible. Yeah. Okay. Helicopter crashed into the Hudson River on April 10th, 2025. We see that there. The FAA ordered the tourism company New York Helicopter to halt operations immediately, the agency said. Good. If you have a fatal accident of this, you should halt operations. There's a lot more to that story that's really interesting. While the cause of the calamity has not been identified, investigators revealed the helicopter did not have a flight data recorder, often called a black box. They revealed that? Yes, helicopters do not commonly have flight data recorders or black boxes. Larger helicopters, sure, but like a small helicopter like this that's carrying 5 people don't have that. It's just not common. When you have like a large jumbo jet, yeah, a flight data recorder is important. A flight data recorder keeps track of about 10,000 data points, everything from vibration coming from the engine to the movement of the control. CNN safety analyst David Shushi said. Actually, I guess I take what I take back earlier. I did not know that. I'm just reading this for the first time. Vibration coming from the engine. Would that have helped in this accident? We don't know the cause of the accident, but if it had vibration tracking, actually, yeah, maybe that would have made a difference. But this was also a Bell 206 that was built, I believe, in the 90s or the early 2000s. I don't know if they had that technology. Most aircraft don't, so have like technology that specific. The black boxes are key to aviation safety because they leave critical clues for investigators after the crash, such as a pilot's actions and possible mechanical issues. Yeah, I'm not going to speculate, but I don't know. I don't know pilots' actions. I mean, yeah, you could have had flight control information that potentially could have been helpful, and possible mechanical issues, vibration data could have been beneficial. I think it would be beneficial. Yeah, I think if helicopter tours or helicopters could have black boxes affordably, obviously more data is beneficial. But tourism helicopters don't have to install flight data recorders, even though the NTSB has repeatedly clamored for that requirement since 2013. I actually don't mind that. I would love to have black boxes. It's just it's not common right now. Mandating flight data recorders would permit more definitive evaluation of the causes of fatal air tour accidents and identification of more effective measures to prevent them. I think that's fundamentally true. The NTSB said in a 2022 report titled "Failure of FAA to Implement NTSB Recommendations Contributed to Fatal Air Tour Helicopter Crash." Let me read that again. Failure of FAA to implement NTSB recommendations contributed to fatal air tour helicopter crash. Okay, what implementations? Let me reread this whole thing. I don't know if this is making sense to you guys, but I'm going to zoom in here. Mandating flight data recorders would permit more definitive evaluation of the causes of fatal air tour accidents and identification of more effective measures to prevent them. For sure, that is true. Does that correlate to this next sentence? The NTSB said in a 2022 report titled "Failure of FAA to Implement NTSB Recommendations Contributed to Fatal Air Tour Helicopter Crash." NTSB says, is this a correlation? This whole paragraph, if maybe I'm being stupid. I might be being stupid right now. But mandating flight data recorders, I don't know if that's... The NTSB said in a 2022 report titled "Failure of FAA to Implement NTSB Recommendations." What is the FAA supposed to implement every recommendation? I don't know. I don't want to get bogged down, but that sentence. Let me know down below what is your interpretation of this paragraph right here. This couple sentences. That agency released the report. Oh, I should have kept reading. It says it right here. The agency released that report after determining a 2019 crash in Hawaii might have been preventable had the FAA implemented a series of prior NTSB recommendations. The sightseeing crash in Hawaii killed all 6 passengers and their pilot. Okay, yeah. So some NTSB recommendations absolutely should be implemented, but that doesn't have anything to do with mandating flight data recorders. That is a recommendation, and maybe it's a good recommendation, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to this. But the NTSB doesn't have the power to enact new aviation rules. Its job is to investigate major disasters and then use its findings to make safety recommendations to the FAA, which has the power to make new requirements. That is true. They make all sorts of recommendations. If you did every single recommendation, I mean, I think it would be good because it would be super safe, but then the whole aviation industry would crumble to a fault. We do things quite safely and we can always make safety improvements, but every single safety recommendation would just be really hard to implement safely. And with like older fleets, it's very hard. NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady reiterated her call for more flight recorders after last week's tragedy. Sure, I think we got bigger fish to fry. I think we got bigger problems. We have issued recommendations in the past on recorders, crash-resistant recorders, Hamady said Friday. We've issued numerous recommendations on safety management systems. Okay, safety management systems are great. Flight data recorders are great. I don't know if that would have changed anything here. We maybe would have known exactly what happened, and maybe that makes it preventable, but I don't think it would have... Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. I guess if you do have flight data recorders on every single aircraft, and if you know exactly how every single incident happens, then a lot of accidents in the future are preventable. It's true. That's true. I mean, I'm just talking out loud. We're reading this article here because I paid $3 for it. The current rulemaking environment requires that new regulations have a positive economic cost and benefit to society, the report said. The estimated cost for industry to comply with these recommendations is $20,000 or more per aircraft, totaling $180 million. That's expensive. In a statement to CNN, the FAA said it takes NTSB recommendations seriously and has taken concrete actions to address tourism aviation safety. I think that's true. The FAA and NTSB share the same goal of continually improving aviation safety, the FAA said Wednesday. In 2024, we finalized a rule requiring most air tourism operators to implement a safety management system, and we are working to meet the requirements outlined in Section 363 of the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act. These efforts include developing additional rulemaking proposals to enhance safety for certain passenger carrying operations. Yeah, I think safety management systems are great. I think black boxes and flight data recorders are great. I think the requirement to do that would shut down a lot of businesses, and it would be very, very challenging to do that. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Potentially. I don't know. Why some safety recommendations don't get enacted. There can be good reasons for not adopting some NTSB aviation suggestions, said Susi, who was an FAA safety inspector for 17 years. Interesting. That's definitely true. One reason could be financial. The FAA must weigh the potential benefits of safety recommendations against the costs, which might eventually trickle down to passengers. Yeah, of course. This would... Sightseeing helicopter tours are already extremely expensive. If you implement this $20,000 mandatory cost for every aircraft, that's going to put a bunch of American businesses out, and the cost is going to become exponential for customers, because all of this is going to go to the customers. I mean, the companies might eat some of it, but that cost would obviously go to the customers. And then it's like, I mean, helicopter air tours are already like relatively safe, in my opinion. Is it worth mandating flight data recorders so that you know exactly why an accident happened, when we can tell relatively clearly for a lot of accidents? Like if you go inadvertent IMC and you get spatially disoriented and have an accident, do you need a flight data recorder for that? And is it worth causing the industry to have to spend so much money, and then people don't get to go on helicopters anymore, and then helicopter ambulance operators are also struggling because they have to pay? I don't know. I don't know that it really makes that big of a difference. Especially, flight data recorders are great because you know exactly what happened to the helicopter. But we have so many cameras and ADS-B tracking. I mean, cameras plus ADS-B plus potentially air traffic control communications. You can piece together a really good story. Is it worth the cost? I don't know. Other times the FAA might decide a new safety rule could actually pose greater risk. One example involved commercial planes and parents holding small children in their laps. There was a recommendation that came across my desk when I was with the FAA, and it said, we're going to make every child on board the aircraft buy a seat and be in that seat when the aircraft takes off. So we did the analysis, and guess what it found? More people would die if we did that than if we didn't, he said. We did the calculations that if a family of 4 had taken a flight and they had to buy 4 seats as opposed to 2 seats and they had to carry their children, then they would say, no, we're not going to do that. They would make the decision not to go because of the expense, and they would drive their cars instead. And the rate from deaths from car travel is significantly higher than the rate of deaths from the plane accidents. Haha. Good analysis. I'm glad that the people at the FAA are clearly thinking. Helicopter tourism safety has improved. Okay. We're on to some positives here. The FAA has implemented numerous safety rules after previous tourism helicopter disasters. A spate of fatal sightseeing crashes at the Grand Canyon in the 1970s led to the first time that they tried to control helicopter tourism at all, Sushi said. And the FAA increased helicopter tourism safety in Hawaii after a pilot navigated around other sightseeing aircraft and flew too close to a volcano decades ago, Sushi said. That guy came too close and in front of some other helicopters to get the best view, and he came so close to the volcano that the air was way too hot. It was like 150 degrees air, which means there's very thin air, and the blades just can't produce lift in that air, so the helicopter just started falling down, and it can't maintain its altitude. Whoa! That copter descended to the ground slowly, and everyone on board survived, but it prompted new guidance about helicopter tourism traffic and designated helipads. That's crazy. That's a crazy story. Yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. I'm glad maybe they put some implementation in for that. That's crazy. Before, tourism helicopters came in from everywhere, including dozens of launch sites on the Big Island alone, Shushi said, who worked on the Hawaii accident. Afterward, helicopter operators took off from specific designated helipads. They actually coordinated when they took off and when they returned. That's great. That's how New York City works as well. In popular air tour locales such as Hawaii and New York, streamlined designated helipads or helipads are common for helicopter tours. That's right. We all fly the exact same route. We all take off. We all use the same terminology. We all fly at the same altitudes, typically approximately the same speeds. It is quite safe. Pilots juggled tour guide duties while flying at low altitudes. Imagine if a passenger on a commercial jet were allowed to chat with pilots throughout the flight, asking questions while the pilots pointed out great photo opportunities. That scenario is similar to the kind of multitasking many tourism helicopter pilots perform. And while helicopters fly more slowly than commercial jets, helicopters pilots face unique challenges. We sure do. We sure do. Helicopters are hard to fly. They're multi-dimensional, Goal said. You're not just going up and down and left and right. You're hovering. It's a harder instrument to fly. It is a harder instrument to fly. when I'm hovering, I'm not typically talking to my passengers. The FAA has labeled the Hudson River and East River as special flight rules area, meaning pilots must follow location-specific procedures during their flight. Air tour pilots must regularly communicate their positions over the Hudson River, Smith said. It's aircraft to aircraft. It's called Common Area Frequency, Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. There, they have specific points that they have to do radio calls. That's kind of true, but also in New York City, you can't. In New York City, you absolutely can be on the CTAF, the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, or the Hudson River Frequency, but also air tours do operate in the Bravos at 1,500 feet. You have to be cleared into the Bravo airspace, and then air traffic control is watching you for a segment of the flight. I won't get into the nitty gritty, but that's kind of true. In other words, every tour pilot in the area must be dialed into the same frequency and communicating locations with one another. Essentially true, but kind of not. When you take off, you're on a CTAF, and then you talk to Newark, and then you talk to LaGuardia, and then you go back to the CTAF. You're not always talking to all the helicopters in the area. The FAA calls it see and avoid, and it has been going on for a very long time. It's very effective, Smith said. Many helicopters in the Northeast also have collision avoidance system, he said. That is also true. Some do, some don't. In addition, all sightseeing helicopters must have all their lights on and can't fly faster than 140 knots or 161 miles per hour. 140 knots is extremely fast. No tours anywhere in America are typically doing that fast. And having lights on is great and beneficial, but it's still hard to see other aircraft. Ideally, sightseeing pilots wouldn't have to double as tour guides while flying. I didn't have to do that. I don't know about the other companies. I think a lot of them use soundtracks and audio tracks, but definitely some do point out. The former NTSB managing director said Goals, the former NTSB managing director, alternatives could include having a separate tour guide on board or playing a pre-recorded audio or video guide for passengers. Okay, that's what we do. I love the idea of having a separate tour guide on board. That's fun. That would be fun. But that wouldn't work. Not that it wouldn't work, but it would just... That would be hard because you'd have someone in there all day. That'd be hard for that person. But then cost effectively, you're trying to get 6 people into a 206 or a 407. 6 passengers. If you have to fill one of those seats up with another person, that's hard. Imagine an R44 with a specific tour guide in the helicopter. Your profits just go out the window. But some air tour passengers already use pre-recorded guides. Right, especially international tourists who speak different languages, Smith said. I can tell you from experience because I started in the air tour world in 1997. A lot of passengers use headsets now, where you plug in a headset and you hear the tour. Exactly, that's what I did. You could play, if you had a group of Chinese passengers, you could have the tour play in Chinese or Japanese or Spanish, or Dutch or French or German, anything. You could kind of ask them what language they speak, and if you have a full group in the helicopter, it was great for me. But some air tour passengers already... I said that. I can tell you, although sightseeing pilots double as tour guides, it's not like a tour that you would imagine on a double-decker bus where someone's sitting there on the radio and talking about everything from their entire time, Smith said. What the tour pilot is doing is going, that's the Empire State Building, that's Grant's Tomb, that's the George Washington Bridge, and the radio is right there. He's listening to the traffic. He said, if it gets busy, the safety doesn't suffer, the quality of the tour suffers. Exactly true. If needed, the pilot will say, I need everyone to be quiet, I'm listening to the radio, Smith said. Usually there is a very good rapport between the pilot and the passengers. Yeah, you can also isolate the passengers. If everyone's just if they're doing too much and you need to just shut everyone off, you just press isolate and then it's just you and your radios. Great feature. If pilots needed to concentrate while getting peppered with questions, they'll shut down that communication, Smith said. There's actually an isolate button. Oh yeah, they can push the isolate button and isolate the pilot from the passengers. And excuse me, I'm kind of under the weather here. That's why my voice sounds like that. What to do before boarding a helicopter sightseeing flight? Interesting. Let's read this. Tourists who are eager to try the thrilling experience need to do their homework before selecting a company. Absolutely true. I agree with that. Find out that these carriers, the operators, have a solid safety record and they follow the rules and that their pilots are trained. That's great. That's easier said than done because if you go on any website, most of them are going to sound like pretty legit. And they are. It's kind of really hard to figure out who's good and bad. Besides just knowing someone in the industry locally, it's like it's pretty hard. Tourists can also check the FAA's website to see if the company has a track record of accidents. That is also true. That is also true. But companies also change names all the time, so that makes it kind of hard. But air tour companies prioritize safety just as much as the tourists, Smith said. No pilot or company wants to jeopardize their own lives or livelihoods for any risky flight. I kind of disagree with that. No pilot, for sure. Company owners, yeah. Not just in tours, but a lot of aviation operations. Company owners, they will push. And it does happen in New York City at certain places. So yeah, you got to protect yourself as a pilot. And in general, that's true, but there are some places that will push. The amount of money an accident costs a company is almost unfathomable. Of course, they are insured, but it's no different than driving a car. Your insurance rates go through the roof. Sometimes the insurance company will drop you, Smith said. So it's not taken lightly. Like, hey, we've got to go make this $800 on this tour in this bad weather, he said, because your consequences of having an incident and accident are going to be a lot more than $800. Yeah, that's true. Fundamentally, that's true. However, my experience has been that some operators will absolutely push for flights to happen even in bad weather to go make that $800. So in theory, this would make sense, but that's not always how it works out. All right, there you go. I have never read through that article, so that's kind of an interesting article. Shout out to the writer. I think she actually did like a pretty fair job. Holly Yan. I mean, a flight data recorder would not have prevented it. She's not necessarily making that argument, but she's very adamant about that. And I think a flight data recorder in every helicopter would, in theory, be a great idea. Operationally and effectively, I think it would be very hard to make that happen. Extremely expensive, and that would cause the industry to have problems. That would cause a lot of businesses to go under, a lot of operators to go under. And I don't know that it's necessarily needed because we have videos and ADS-B data, and if everyone dies on board, it's really hard to hear from people on board. But if it's a non-fatal, you can get accounts from people on board of exactly what happened. I just don't know if it's necessary, because a lot of accidents are pretty cut and dry. There are some where you're like, what happened? And a flight data recorder could definitely be beneficial, but some you really don't need it. So I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. I think helicopter tourism is safe. I would put my family on it. I have taken my family on helicopter tours. It was different because I was the pilot, so when I was in control, I felt comfortable. But in general, like if I were to go on a helicopter tour, I would feel pretty safe. Of course, there is some risk, but if you were flying with like a very large company and the weather's good, in general, you're probably going to be pretty safe. Like the accident rate per 100,000 is quite low. So in general, you're going to be pretty safe, but it is a gamble. But also driving to the airport to go on the tour is more risky. So I think helicopter tours are safe. I want to know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think about the helicopter tourism industry? What do you think about this article? Would you go on a helicopter tour as it stands right now? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.